Every little thing irritated John Simmons that day. That included the rainy weather outside his window and the migraine pounding on his head. The problems piling up at work didn't help either. He took another look through the accounting reports, trying to figure out why his business's income had been so low over the past month. John had been running the restaurant for many years, and this was the first time he had ever seen such low profits. Mr. Simmons' restaurant was in the downtown area of the city and had many regular customers and tourists. That's why he couldn't figure out why the restaurant was in the red and leaking money badly. He decided to speak to the manager that had been in charge of the restaurant for the past 3 months to see if he could find the answer. "Amanda, please come in. We need to have a serious conversation," John called, opening the door to his office. Soon enough, a brown-haired woman with long legs appeared in front of him. She looked at her boss questioningly. "Do you need something, John?" Amanda asked, smiling. Mr. Simmons grimaced as she came in and gestured for her to take a seat. The only reason John let Amanda speak to him in that tone was because Amanda was also his lover. Essentially, this is how she secured the managing position at the restaurant, which was now suffering losses probably due to her negligence. Mr. Simmons showed her a 3-month report. He didn't expect Amanda's astonishment, and for her to say she knew nothing about the losses. "She's lying. She must be. I can see it in her eyes," John thought to himself. He chose not to make any assumptions out loud. All things considered, John enjoyed his relationship with Amanda. He felt loved and desired when he was with her. All that John asked for was complete anonymity and secrecy. Thus, he always behaved markedly cold around Amanda in public and never gave anyone reason to suspect that he had feelings for her. Amanda didn't get her position as restaurant manager just for being John's lover. In addition to helping with the business itself, Amanda was constantly spying on his staff. This sly girl would meticulously record each compromising fact on her coworkers that she picked up. Thanks to her, John knew that the busboy would secretly take leftovers from the kitchen to homeless animals at the shelter. He also knew that the chef would cook frozen meat and served it as a first-rate veal with a hefty price. For the most part, these misdeeds didn't cause much damage to the restaurant, but when combined, they can easily explain why the profits were shrinking. After reviewing the data in Amanda's notebook, John gathered the entire staff in the lobby and began reprimanding each of the employees one by one. As this was happening, none of his employees could understand where Mrs. Simmons was getting this information from. The staff looked at each other suspiciously, but had no idea that the blame belonged on Amanda, who was smiling slyly and licking her lips. At the end of his fiery speech, John added that he would be penalizing each employee with a deduction from their salaries corresponding to the damage they had caused. "There, that's better," thought the man, and looked at his employees with satisfaction. After this incident, most of the employees lowered their eyes and went about their lives. For some, it meant figuring out how to pay off their next credit card bill. For someone else, it was taking care of their sick mother. The problems that John's employees faced didn't concern him much. He just wanted to get his due earnings and spend it on a vacation with a pretty girl like Amanda. By his 40s, Mr. Simmons considered himself a true bachelor, and he thought it was impossible for him to get married at this point. That said, this didn't keep John from having occasional flings with all kinds of women. After dishing out punishments to the employees, Mr. Simmons glanced at his watch and gasped. "Oh my God, I have an appointment with Anthony Rodriguez," whispered John and held his head in his hands. Those two had known each other since college, when they defended the honor of their hometown playing for their school's soccer team. Anthony, like John, was a middle-class businessman who owned a small construction company. The old friends would meet from time to time and reminisce over a glass of drink in a cozy bar. And that's what they had planned for that day, but John had completely forgotten all about it, all because of the problems at the restaurant. He fixed his tie, threw his jacket over his shoulder, and went into the street to catch a cab. As John had suspected, his friend was already waiting for him at the bar. Anthony was already sitting with a glass of drink in his hand, which made him look calm and composed. "Oh my God, John, what happened? You look like hell," Anthony exclaimed, throwing his arms around his friend. All right. Let's talk business later, okay?" John answered evasively and sat down at the table. Soon, they both got to talking about all kinds of things, but avoiding uncomfortable topics. When the conversation started getting more serious, John voiced his concerns. "Yeah, man, I guess things are really bad for you. I think I can help you, though," Anthony said thoughtfully, scratching the back of his head. "What? How could you help me if you don't know anything about restaurant business? You're an expert in construction, but when it comes to a cuisine, you wouldn't be able to sell a fork from a spoon," said John, who took his friend's offer as a joke. No, you misunderstood me. The truth is, I know someone who can help you. It doesn't come cheap, but the effect is amazing," said Anthony as he began going through his notebook, trying to find the right phone number. When he finally found the number, he handed it to his friend. "Beverly Hopkins. A woman, huh?" John grudgingly reached out, peering closely at what was written on the paper. A woman. Not only that, she also served 7 years behind bars in county jail. That being said, there's no better specialist in the field than Beverly. She only takes on the toughest cases like yours," Anthony said. "Well, I don't care if she's a death row inmate, as long as she can help me with my problem," John answered hopefully. The drink they had consumed took its effect soon, and the two friends started jumping from topic to topic and spending the rest of the evening reminiscing about their past. When the night ended, Anthony and John hugged and promised each other that they'd meet up again in a week. John didn't really remember the end of that evening, and all the drink that he had drunk took its toll on him. He didn't even remember how he made it to his bed. That whole night, he was tormented by nightmares of the past, nightmares of those days when he took his first steps in the world of business. Back then, John Simmons had committed something so shameful that he swore he'd never think of it again. That day, though, the drink loosened his memory up and forced him to relive those unpleasant moments. The next morning, John awoke feeling as if his body were completely broken. Tormented by the hangover, John got up, got dressed, and went to the restaurant. That day, he had an appointment with this woman who was supposed to sort out all of his problems. Beverly Hopkins turned out to be a pleasant woman in her 40s, dressed in an elegant business suit and high heels. John couldn't help but feel that her face was somehow familiar to him, but he couldn't remember where and when he had seen her before, as his head was still spinning from the night before. Beverly patiently listened to the businessman's messy story and volunteered to help. Mrs. Hopkins only had one question. She requested that while she worked, John wouldn't interfere with the business in any way. Simply put, John had to stay away from the restaurant for at least a couple of weeks. That's some great service. It's been a long time since I've taken a vacation. I guess I'll take Amanda and go relax on some island, John Simmons thought with a happy smile. Having accepted Mrs. Hopkins' condition, the happy businessman hurried to find his lover to break the good news to her. Needless to say, Amanda was thrilled with the offer. The 2 weeks they spent in the atmosphere of a pleasant holiday on the islands flew by in the blink of an eye. On the way back to his hometown, John couldn't wait to see how his restaurant had transformed, and it did change beyond recognition. When the businessman came to the parking lot out front, he didn't see a single car, which meant that there were no customers and no employees there. What's going on? What are those burns? I swear to God, if they don't show up right now, I'll fire them all. No exceptions, John shouted as he got out of the cozy saloon of his Chevrolet. Suddenly, the door of the restaurant swung open, and Beverly Hopkins appeared on the doorstep. "Why are you screaming, Mr. Simmons? You don't have to fire anybody. I took that liberty upon myself a while back," said the woman with a charming smile. "What? Then who's working at the restaurant? And why aren't there any customers inside?" John asked, stunned. "Your restaurant isn't open. It's been closed for 2 weeks. You've also taken a few orders from weddings and parties, and trust me, they all came from very wealthy people. I made sure of that myself. And now you won't have enough money to pay the penalties for not fulfilling your obligations," Beverly said. "What have you done? My business, it's ruined," John said under his breath, bringing his hands to his head. Beverly only smiled in response. She reminded the businessman of the incident that happened 10 years earlier, when he had framed her and sent her to prison for a long 7-year sentence. Back then, Beverly and John had been mere companions, taking a chance at starting a business from scratch. As the business started picking up, John Simmons decided to take all the assets for himself. To do this, he framed Beverly of tax evasion. Thus, the trusting woman ended up in jail, and John filed for bankruptcy. When he got his hands on all the cash, he opened up his own restaurant. And now, standing right before the sly businessman was the very same Beverly. Years passed, and Beverly had changed her name and entire image to the point where she was virtually unrecognizable. That day, Beverly was the angel of vengeance, who had come to punish her dishonest partner. Once he realized that he was on the verge of bankruptcy, John fell to his knees and wept bitterly. But his tears had no effect on Beverly Hopkins. She had been waiting for this moment for 10 long years. Justice had prevailed. Beverly smiled to herself. With the click of her heels, she went on towards her new life, in which there would be no more deceit and no more dishonest partners.